Have you ever noticed that the moment you finally start to believe in yourself, fear shows up like an uninvited guest at your door? You're finally feeling confident about that new direction you're taking. You're excited about the changes happening in your life. You can actually see your dreams becoming reality. And then, out of nowhere, your mind starts racing with doubt. Your chest tightens, your stomach drops. You question everything you thought you knew about yourself. Most people think this means they're failing. They assume fear is proof they're on the wrong path. But what if I told you the exact opposite is true? What if fear isn't a red light telling you to stop, but a green light confirming you're moving in the right direction? Today we're going to explore why fear is actually your transformation's best friend, and how understanding this one shift in perspective can change everything about how you navigate growth, change, and becoming the person you're meant to be. Think about a butterfly inside its cocoon. Right before it emerges, there's a period of complete darkness and discomfort. The caterpillar's entire body is dissolving. Everything it once knew about itself is literally breaking down. If that caterpillar could think, it would probably be terrified. It would have no idea that this terrifying dissolution is actually the beginning of something magnificent. This is exactly what happens to us during transformation. Fear shows up not because we're in danger, but because we're in transition. Our old identity, our familiar patterns, our comfortable limitations are all starting to dissolve. And just like that caterpillar, we have no idea that what feels like an ending is actually a beginning. The human brain is wired to keep us alive, not to keep us happy or fulfilled. It's constantly scanning for threats, and anything unfamiliar registers as potentially dangerous. So when you start stepping into a new version of yourself, when you begin making choices that align with your growth rather than your comfort zone, your brain sounds the alarm bells. Not because you're actually in danger, but because you're entering uncharted territory. This is why people who start eating healthier suddenly crave junk food more intensely than ever. It's why someone who decides to leave a toxic relationship feels overwhelmed by loneliness right after making that decision. It's why entrepreneurs feel the most self-doubt right before their breakthrough. The old patterns are fighting to survive. But here's what changes everything about how you experience this process. When you understand that fear is actually evidence of growth, you can stop fighting it and start working with it. You can recognize it as a sign that you're expanding beyond your previous limitations, rather than a sign that something is wrong. I want you to think about the last time you felt genuine fear about a positive change in your life. Maybe it was starting a new job, moving to a new city, ending a relationship that wasn't serving you, or pursuing a dream you'd been putting off. In that moment of fear, what was really happening? Your old self was recognizing that change was coming, and it was trying to pull you back to what felt safe and familiar. This is normal. This is healthy. This is part of the process. The problem isn't the fear itself. The problem is how we interpret the fear. Most of us have been taught to avoid fear at all costs, to see it as a sign that we should turn back. But what if we've had it backwards this entire time? Consider this. Every single person who has ever created meaningful change in their life has had to walk through fear to get there. Every artist who ever shared their work with the world, every person who ever left a secure job to start their own business, every individual who ever stood up for what they believed in despite opposition. They all felt fear. The difference is, they didn't let fear make the decision for them. Fear is information. It's your internal GPS system telling you that you're moving from the known to the unknown, and the unknown is where all growth happens. You can't discover new continents without losing sight of the shore. You can't become who you're meant to be while clinging to who you've always been. But let's get practical about this. How do you actually work with fear instead of against it? First, you need to change your relationship with the sensation itself. When fear shows up in your body, instead of immediately trying to make it go away, try getting curious about it. Where do you feel it? Is it in your chest, your stomach, your throat? What does it actually feel like? Most of the time, we're not actually afraid of the fear itself. We're afraid of the stories our mind tells us about what the fear means. We think it means we're not ready. We think it means we're going to fail. We think it means we should wait until we feel more confident. But confidence isn't the absence of fear. Confidence is feeling the fear and moving forward anyway. The next time you feel fear about a positive change you want to make in your life, try this. Put your hand on your heart and say, "Thank you, fear. Thank you for letting me know that I'm growing. Thank you for confirming that I'm moving beyond my comfort zone and into my potential." This isn't about positive thinking or pretending everything is fine. This is about recognizing fear for what it actually is. A biological response to change that served our ancestors when they were facing physical threats, but that often works against us in our modern world, where most of our fears are psychological rather than physical. Your body doesn't know the difference between running from a tiger and starting a new business. It responds to both with the same fight or flight response. But you can train your mind to distinguish between actual danger and growth opportunities. You can learn to feel the fear without letting it drive your decisions. Think about learning to drive a car. The first time you got behind the wheel, you probably felt nervous, maybe even scared. Your hands might have been shaking. Your heart was probably racing. Did that fear mean you weren't meant to drive? Of course not. It meant you were doing something new and important. And with practice, what once felt terrifying became natural. This is how all growth works. The fear is strongest at the beginning when everything is unfamiliar. But as you take action despite the fear, as you prove to yourself that you can handle the unknown, the fear begins to transform. It doesn't disappear completely, but it loses its power to control you. There's a beautiful concept in psychology called post-traumatic growth. It's the idea that sometimes our greatest challenges become the catalyst for our most significant development. The breakdown becomes the breakthrough. The crisis becomes the opportunity for transformation. This applies to fear as well. When you learn to move through fear rather than around it, you develop what psychologists call emotional resilience. You prove to yourself that you can handle difficult emotions without being destroyed by them. You discover that you're stronger than you thought you were. But here's what's really profound about this process. When you stop running from fear and start walking toward your dreams despite feeling afraid, you're not just changing your external circumstances, you're literally rewiring your brain. You're creating new neural pathways that associate growth with possibility rather than danger. Every time you feel fear and choose growth anyway, you're sending a message to your subconscious mind that says, "I'm capable of handling whatever comes my way." You're building trust with yourself. You're proving that you're committed to becoming who you're meant to be, even when it's uncomfortable. This is particularly important because transformation is rarely a one-time event. It's an ongoing process. You don't just change once and then remain changed forever. Growth happens in waves. You expand, then you integrate. You stretch, then you stabilize. You break through, then you build upon that breakthrough. And at each level of growth, you'll encounter new fears. The fear of success can be just as paralyzing as the fear of failure. The fear of being seen can be just as limiting as the fear of being ignored. But when you understand that these fears are simply markers indicating you're entering new territory, you can navigate them with much more grace and confidence. Let's talk about what this looks like in real life. Imagine you've been dreaming of starting your own creative project. Maybe it's writing a book, starting a podcast, launching an art studio, or beginning a coaching practice. You've been thinking about it for months, maybe even years. You have ideas, you have passion, but every time you sit down to actually begin, fear creeps in. The fear might sound like, who am I to think I have something valuable to offer? What if people think my work is terrible? What if I fail and everyone sees it? This is your old identity trying to keep you safe in the familiar territory of dreams and potential, rather than the vulnerable territory of action and results. But what if instead of listening to those fearful thoughts, you recognize them as confirmation that you're about to do something meaningful? What if you interpreted that fear as your soul's way of telling you that this project matters to you? What if you saw it as evidence that you're ready to grow beyond who you've been? When you shift your interpretation of fear from, "I shouldn't do this," to, "This must be important to me," everything changes. The fear is still there, but now it's working for you instead of against you. It becomes fuel for your transformation rather than a barrier to it. This doesn't mean you should be reckless or ignore practical considerations. There's a difference between healthy caution and fear-based paralysis. Healthy caution says, Let me prepare for this challenge and consider potential obstacles. Fear-based paralysis says, I can't do this until I feel completely confident and certain of the outcome. The truth is, you'll never feel completely ready for the next level of your life. Readiness isn't a feeling you wait for. Readiness is a decision you make. It's the choice to begin before you feel prepared. It's the willingness to learn as you go, rather than trying to learn everything before you start. Consider the people you most admire, the ones who have created lives that inspire you. Do you think they felt completely confident when they made their biggest moves? Do you think they had no fear when they took their greatest risks? Or do you think they felt the fear and took action anyway? Most breakthrough moments happen not when fear disappears, but when we decide that our dreams are more important than our fears. When we recognize that staying comfortable is actually the riskiest choice of all, because it means never discovering what we're truly capable of. This brings us to one of the most important distinctions you can make in your life: the difference between fear that protects you and fear that limits you. Protective fear keeps you from walking into traffic or touching a hot stove. Limiting fear keeps you from sharing your gifts with the world, or pursuing meaningful relationships, or taking calculated risks that could transform your life. Learning to distinguish between these two types of fear is crucial for anyone who wants to grow. Protective fear is usually immediate, specific, and related to genuine physical danger. Limiting fear is usually vague, persistent, and related to potential emotional discomfort or social judgment. When you feel fear, ask yourself, is this fear protecting me from actual harm, or is it protecting me from growth? If it's the latter, that's your cue that you're on the right track. That fear is not your enemy. It's your compass pointing toward your next evolution. But let's acknowledge something important here. Working with fear instead of against it isn't always easy. It requires practice, patience, and self-compassion. There will be times when the fear feels overwhelming. There will be moments when you want to retreat back to what's familiar. This is normal and human. The key is not to judge yourself for feeling afraid. The key is to recognize that feeling afraid doesn't mean you have to act from fear. You can acknowledge the fear, thank it for trying to keep you safe, and then make your decision based on what aligns with your growth and your values, rather than what feels most comfortable in the moment. This is where the magic happens. When you can hold space for fear without being controlled by it, you develop something invaluable: the ability to act with courage. And courage isn't the absence of fear. Courage is feeling afraid and choosing love anyway, choosing growth anyway, choosing to trust in your potential anyway. Every person who has ever made a meaningful contribution to the world has had to develop this relationship with fear. They've had to learn to feel it without letting it make their decisions for them. They've had to discover that the very thing they were most afraid of was often the very thing that would set them free. So the next time fear shows up in your life, remember this: it's not a stop sign. It's not a warning that you're on the wrong path. It's a sign that you're alive, that you're growing, that you're pushing against the boundaries of who you've been to discover who you're becoming. Your fear is not your limitation. Your relationship with fear is what determines whether it becomes a prison or a doorway. When you learn to see fear as evidence of transformation and progress, when you understand that it's a natural part of the growth process, you can finally stop waiting to feel fearless and start living courageously. Because the truth is, the life you want is waiting for you on the other side of the fear you're avoiding. Your next level self is calling you forward. And yes, it might feel scary to answer that call, but that fear isn't telling you to turn back. It's telling you that what you're moving toward matters. It's telling you that you're about to become someone new. And becoming someone new is exactly what transformation is all about. Not erasing who you've been, but expanding beyond who you thought you could be. Fear is just your old self's way of saying goodbye. So thank it for its service, honor it for trying to protect you, and then step boldly into the magnificent unknown of your potential. Because your fear means transformation is happening, and that's the most beautiful thing in the world.